Shirley here with Sirius Talis Moon. This is Jupiter, our Mercury day. And ascendant is 9 degrees Cancer. Moon is ingressed to Aquarius, conjoining Pluto, which is a great time to talk about the outer planets. Now they're all retrograding, but I want to talk about the outer planets in a yod because I just want to talk about that. Anyway, I talked about my own Uranus being in a yod, and a yod is basically a point of two inconjuncts. And this is a very, very, very volatile juncture. If you think about a place where, let's say, you have the sea and you have that little wall with the stones that breaks the waves, and then you have the two parts of the sea coming to meet and their waves interact. They're not opposing each other. They're not trining each other. They're still colliding. And that place is very, very difficult to swim. And I remember that a while ago my mama took me to the sea and I stood in that particular point because I needed to meditate. And this was um, this was the exact spirit of the inconjunct. It is not two opposite forces. It is not two harmonious forces. It's two forces that clash and harmonize, and you're standing in the point between those forces, kind of like being in Israel. and, but not only, and there's just, it's not the Zen, because Zen is like holding oppositions, and it's just something that is standing in the point of disruption and being still in the point of disruption, which is in itself disruptive. I think perhaps a lot of you have felt seen when you react to me, and uh, because this is where this is kind of the spirit of an inconjunct. So let's talk about the outer planets. So Uranus being in the point of a yod is about the way you rebel, the reasons you rebel, um, the way you're at peace with rebellion, or at peace not rebelling the way that everybody rebels. Um, the way that, even for astrologers, the way that you do astrology, okay, the way that you do scientific revolutions, because for me, I got into astrology through a scientific revolution and studied philosophy of science in the concept of medicine in the Department of Politics and Governance. And everybody told me nobody's going to vouch for that, but I actually had an instructor who was an MD and philosopher of science. So when you think about that, and that's kind of, the way your kundalini rises, the way you liberate yourself, is not just provocational because it's Uranus. Of course, it's going to be provoking, but is also a point of disruption. It causes disruption in one's own life, but also the lives of everybody around them. Um, and then I move on to Pluto. Having Pluto in a yod is whenever one does the Pluto stuff, whether it's shadow work, whether it's standing in one's power, um, whether it is the purgatory rebirthing cycle of Pluto, they're basically standing in peace and in conjunct. And um, and that can create a lot of disruption, because what's standing, the piece in which they're standing in their power is disrupting their lives and the lives of the people around them. Vulcan, I don't know how many of you have the planets in yours, so I don't have all the charts together, what all, let me see here, with the, no, wait, I need to see that, because that would be with this one, the inconjunct would be here and here. Aha! And um, and now to Neptune. So Neptune in an inconjunct, whenever one is, well, this is very interesting. I think Neptune in inconjunct could be like Carlo Gambino, because Neptune is mafia. I don't remember Carlo Gambino's chart. Let's bring Carlo Gambino's chart, because this is whenever one is doing Neptune. That can be poetry, that can be the dream state, that can be dealing with grief. Natal chart. That can be channeling. I wonder, wait, is my ascendant in an inconjunct? Because my ascendant is inconjunct in my Pluto, and for the other side of the inconjunct would be Virgo, Libra. That would be the end of Leo, but I don't have a point there. So it's not, my ascendant is not in an inconjunct. And so Neptune. No, it's in a bisextile. Or is it? Yeah, it's in a bisextile. But I'm thinking whenever, no, but he managed to harmonize. But if you think about, let's say, a person being poetic, or usually, for example, when people have hard Neptunian aspects, that's the time to sing, to write poetry, and so on. And then the inconjunct would create a point of disruption trying to do that. Or the way in which one channels would be in a point of disruption. Is my Neptune in an inconjunct? Wait a second, I have my Neptune in the beginning of Capricorn, so the inconjunct would be the end of Cancer, or basically inconjunct in Procyon that I work with a lot, and the end of Taurus, or the beginning. It's inconjuncting my Chiron, and I have a midpoint between my Chiron and my descendant on Procyon, around Procyon. So it's creating that type of thing, which is why when I do my channeling, it is disrupting both my life and other people's. But the thing with the inconjuncts, it's kind of a Uranian aspect. So if people that would ask what would Aries be like in an inconjunct, I can't even begin to imagine that. Okay, it's like you think about, you know what? You think about the people who were cloned but not ritually abused, trying to come to the surface with their story. Because that would disrupt the entire scientific endeavor that tries to keep them hidden, but also everything we know about nature and nurture. And they would be considered privileged to the people that haven't gone through torture, but absolutely not privileged for being targeted all their lives because of that. So they're close enough to the problem so that they can see the problem, and far enough so that they can see the solution. Some of them, But that would probably be, or you think about, a feminist Palestinian woman. I rest, I rest my shenanigans. A woman, a woman who supports willing consent in the world of intelligence and espionage. That would be kind of conjoining of like Neptune in conjunct and Aries. I think the last example is more Neptunian, but the the Palestinian feminist woman is definitely Aries in conjunct. um, you know what? Particularly if she's not gay. Particularly if she's not gay. Um, so this is where the yods come into play, and they express their disruption. I just have to stab a potato. I'm sorry, I'm just gonna have to stab a potato for combating spiritual warfare without falling into Inquisition timelines. Love Jesus, but I think we need to move on from like idealizing the cross. Every time I speak, something happens, and if I don't, then that would mean that everybody would say, but why didn't you say something? Um, yes, so that was the inconjuncts moment that I needed to share with you. More things that I have to say. I'm trying to think about my Neptune Square because for me it's squaring from the 11th to the 2nd, and Saturn will be conjoining on the world degree 1 degree away from the last touch on my Neptune square, and um, I just think about the many things that are beyond the scope of, you know Mariah Carey recently had an album, and one of her songs talks about nothing being impossible, and I definitely took it far from my trajectory because while being, with Neptune, there are so many things we have to surrender and so many things we have to just let them, just let them be, let them unfold. And there is the longing and the grief and being with that longing and the manifesting that happens on such a lengthy trajectory that it really looks you know, like something is so far-fetched. Um, Neptune Saturn is really about, the real being the dream and the dream being the reality. And I definitely, I definitely seen that because there is both the ideation phase or the not knowing phase. And what's the thing with Neptune? You're not knowing or you're not believing or you're not that. You're basically dreaming and you're like, okay, let's daydream, let's escape to a daydream, having to stab a potato. Just how do you deal with spiritual warfare? I stab potatoes and then I compost them. So that is what does it do? I don't know. Tackling the mafia, like I really don't know. Uh, and this has been, the Neptune sextile for me has been being exposed um, to all those manifestation techniques and saying, I'll give it a shot. I'll just give it a try. Because suddenly I got funding for studies, and however disturbed the circumstances, it was like, hey, at least there is something that I can be okay with, and just enjoy the most of it. Um, and then there were all these Abraham Hicks teachings and trying to lucid dream and holistic medicine and um, tending to peace, which looks weird, but also, but also not, and um, just kind of like forgotten dreams beginning to manifest. And now there's the Neptune Square, which is a crisis of success. The Mars aspect, the square, is a very manifesting aspect. And this is where, you know, I would just be on Twitter, then Musk buys Twitter and actually pays attention to what people write there. But then there is also these people around that are stealing creative force. Um, Under the guise of healing sometimes or whatnot. But then there is also the trajectory where that energy has to do what the original host of the energy would have done in the world. Um, and I remember when Neptune was squaring my ascendant, was conjoining my ascendant, and is squaring my ascendant natally. And one of the things in the channeling experiment that I did was about me doing the astrology readings, and I got an omen to talk about Elon Musk, but it was also kind of like, because it seemed like nobody was watching me. um, but then it was like, I had like 14 views, and then I received an omen. It was like, but who are the viewers? And this is where I really have no idea how things came about. Um, because to me, that was the inspiration of PayPal, and another PayPal person is Peter Thiel, and I had no idea about the weird ideologies around women to do with that. Because for me, I was just learning about entrepreneurship, and it was like, well, the seventh startup was PayPal, and how, taking a couple of times after, backlash or something not working out and so on. And I'm like, okay, this is just something that I learned and I was inspired from. And at the same time, everything that collapses, and being able to have a trajectory to people that I never thought I would ever have any sort of interaction with, all the while dodging Epstein's, dodging Epstein's, and and learning about the darker things that happen, like within those societies, and all the while having Illuminati in my DM, not really paying attention to that. And again, this is so Neptune, because you don't really think that like you think it's some sort of a spam. And then when you're not, selling your soul, and suddenly with the thinning of the veil in social media, then the things that we became more aware of with the people that are actually were our idols that are now having a more of an interaction, um, and that is beyond exciting. Like, one thing I wouldn't think I would say in that regard, or when somebody drops an album or somebody goes through this thing in their business or whatnot, one thing I wouldn't think I would say is, that's relatable. Because those were the people on TV in their mansions, um, that were that were, somewhere behind a smoke screen that seemed so far. And now, whether in business or dealing with, all kinds of intelligences, changes, and so on, in um, anything to do with whether it's music or creativity, is that there were certain trajectories, even with heuristics, that there were certain trajectories that, from being a very young child, there were certain, Neptunian liminal spaces that now begin to manifest, and it's a crisis of success because there is my own sovereignty within that big dream, and the fact that I will do things, I would take those things that I understand, and I would build on that to innovate and to pave the path onwards, so that it's not about giving up my dreams, but actually uh, paving the infrastructure that is kind of like the Wi-Fi that holds many dreams together and manifests them, including the dreams of its creator or creatress. Um, yeah. And so now that Neptune is 0 degree Aries retrograde and will ingress into Pisces, and I just think about, Neptune throughout my passage of life, because Neptune would ingress into Aquarius in 1997, 1996, 7, 2012 to Pisces, and I was born in 84, so probably midway into the 1990, there was a Soviet Union fall, and now we have another Saturn-Neptune conjunction coming up. So that would be when Saturn, and the Soviet Union was when Saturn and Neptune was around my Jupiter, which is the ruler of my ascendant. And I was probably no more than 12. So even less. And that is when there was later the Gulf War. Yeah, I was just like, at that time I would be around 6 years old, just before the first grade. I wrote my first song already. That's what I remember. Um, I built a tent in my own room. I tried to fly. Um, and what more weird things did I do? Because there were some. Um, I think I already became. I was atheist. Yeah, there were just many things that were, and I tried to invent my own language, which looked a little bit like Chinese. Ajax, yes. I don't know where I got that Ajax. Um, um, I invented my own, not clothing line, but there were two designs that I had in my mind, and I was trying to bring them. Um, it was very difficult, and then I would write my first like printed stuff. I think I wrote my first half book by the ingress of Pluto, of Neptune to Aquarius. The Neptune is around dissociation, so I have a lot of very mixed timelines with that. Um, just a lot of a lot of Neptunian stuff, really a lot of Neptunian stuff. Um, Attempts to kidnap me at the hospital. It's true that happened. Unfortunately, a family member saved me. Yeah, and now we're gonna have another Saturn Neptune while I'm having my Neptune square on the world degree. So, and I just think about how I remember the fall of the Soviet Union. I was at school. There was such a Soviet feeling, Soviet collapse feeling, but it was feeling like the Soviet with nostalgia. And I began to feel that a lot recently. And it's not like nostalgic to the Soviet Union. It was like nostalgic feelings because Israel past is very Soviet. In fact, the first before Israel switched hands to the United States, it was switching custody, Mother Russia to Big Brother. And I remember at school there was this Soviet feeling in school. And then there would be the Gulf War, but the Gulf War was before, like, I really don't remember. There was something that looks like the dream state around this entire era. Because Neptune would be crossing the ruler of my ascendant Jupiter. And I saw things from China. I did not know it was China. And I saw, these mountains that have all these weird colors and they're so beautiful. So as a young child, I saw these mountains and I didn't remember, like there wouldn't be I was not exposed to it. I wonder where these beautiful mountains are, and then I would find out that they're in China. I've never been to China, um, and now there's a lot of Chinese energy. But China is owning so much of the Israeli lands that it just makes sense. Um, and so, mm, yeah, just think about my first years. Um, And yeah, having to stab a potato. Coping mechanism. Um, but this reminds me of many things. Anyway, that's what I know about my Neptune square so far. And I'm tending to MK Ultra, MK Often, and so on as an astrologer with a channeling experiment. Um, yes. If I'm trying to think about the difference between my Pluto square, which is not like completely finalized because Pluto is just 1 degree from my Pluto, then my Pluto square was about compost, was about doing charts of many different fields that infuse the Neptunian as well. Think about whistleblowers or hackers and martial artists and science. And then it's like politics was just like, oh, that's just another trajectory. There's a lot of confusion and a lot of clarity as well. So billionaires charts. Um, and that was leading up to my Pluto square, which kind of finalizes about the aftermath of me preventing an assassination attempt, preventing a political assassination. I'm just like, and it just happened. It's not like I aimed for that. It was like one thing connected to another. Um, it's a series of, standing my ground in the face of a trafficking, kidnapping attempts, and many other things, and taking advantage of the opportunities of the thinning of the veil, of the fact that the times are changing, um, and the possibility that I had in the right of the many people that came before me, whether it's women, like Mariah Carey that divorced her husband, who literally jailed her in a mansion. Um, for example, I was 2 years old when I learned that Honey and Butterfly was about that. And the fact that I was asking myself, why was I so dissociated when when I saw the original songs? Because I just listened to the lyrics, and you kind of see that there's a lady and it looks like a damsel in distress, but it's not. and and that was the dissociative part. So it's kind of like my Pluto square is melting into my Neptune square, and my Neptune square is the Bilderbergen-Belsen. It's when my Pluto square led me to tend to the ritual abuse and all those things that people thought were satanic panic. And my Neptune square is basically creating the change or manifesting the change that seemed beyond impossible about wealth consolidation, being a part of a timeline that changes that trajectory. And again, it's a crisis of success because having a Neptune in Capricorn is basically idealizing the Bilderbergen-Belsen. Like, shout out to Arnhem. Like, they have to deal with, oh my gosh, I so need to see the duchies that go like, those SS Gestapo people, they did it to the NATO summit in The Hague. And that, you gotta love duchies. They don't play. but but this is, you're like, you didn't actually say that. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm ideating, but this is exactly what Neptune in Capricorn would look like. And I did a chart of the Bilderbergers with the kind of analyzing the psychosexual problems that come with those rituals, and and to do with the real estate. Um, and you think about the Neptune in Capricorn idealizing those very structures, not really knowing about the lack of sovereignty in those upper echelons. Um, and the square, which is this tension between the I am and the top of the mountains. Um, Bilderberger's the house is the estate is where the skulls and bones meet, and there's basically conjoining of European billionaires and American billionaires to try to think how to enslave the world to get there. But that's not what I thought as a child. In fact, I didn't know that particular asset, um, but that was, you know, Neptune in Capricorn can definitely be the ideation of something that would later be discovered as slavery or the corporate world or climbing up the ladder. And now with the Neptune square is kind of having built my own trajectory and skills and um, kind of mental philosophical assets, and having that basically um, aligning with looking to the looking eye level to the top of the mountain and saying, wait, there is an I am. It's not just about climbing up the ladder, there is also an I am here. And it's not about my way or the highway. It's about, hey, not losing one's soul to have the world is kind of like the basic. But it was not the basic to the people that didn't have the privilege, and they didn't have the privilege because they grew up into elite societies. So for me, the Neptune Square is having to process a lot of things and learning to reappreciate things that I was not aware of as a child or a teenager in the ways that many people paved the path for me to be able to say what I say, for me to be able um, to do what I do, even with all um, the challenges, okay, that come with that. Um, and it's not for nothing that I opened with the yod, because I kind of feel that what it necessitates or requires is not to give up one's dreams, but to pave the path to manifest them sovereignly, happily. And indeed, when Neptune was conjoining my ascendant, one of the questions that I asked was, how do I succeed while being actually happy with my success? And that led me through a lot of trajectories. All the while, I think with the Pluto square before, but also the Neptune square, there was, me being in Israel with suddenly everybody watermelons. and, and I know, thanks to my colleagues that paved the path for me to know that, that we were being Maui'd. So this is a part of where laser focused came. Um, and why I call it a Dirac for me, because I did a chart of a Makrute, and he was inspired by the book of Robert Caro, The Power Broker. Robert Caro? And maybe I mixed the name, Caro, Robert Caro. Anyway, and then I saw the laser investment program, which is in real estate, and it's basically about, people that climb up the ladder through unelected positions. And mind you, Mark Rutte was the prime minister of Netherlands for 14 years. Um, but this is something that kind of stuck in my mind, where the entire New York City was destroyed and rebuilt by people that moved up the ladder through unelected positions and were basically the power brokers. And then I saw the investments in real estate. They were the laser investment, and I'm like, oh my gosh, people are literally investing in their own cities being lasered, and they might, and I might not even know that. So laser focus really is the Dirac for me, in that sense. For those who do not know what is the Dirac Fermi, the Dirac Fermi equation was basically two people that came up and then discovered something at the same time, and instead of battling for the egos, they named the equation Dirac Fermi. Um, And so for me, when I saw Mark Rutte, quoting laser focused, I'm like, okay, that's a direct for me, because laser focus was very much inspired by Robert Caro plus me learning about the laser investment and Maui. And then you literally everywhere I go, people do that laser focus thing. So, and at the same time, my not swiping under the rug things to do with, you know, Aries is about rights, sovereignty, um, and the many expectations that I would just let that be, and I'm like, no, this is not the spirit of the times. And, and that's just me being. It's like the same old things that I've been doing with my mother. I'm doing with the world. It's kind of like, no, 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 no. That's not what's up. There's something else going on in the sky. There's something else going on in the spirit. There's something else going on. And I never said it in those very words, but but that I have a lot of divination on the 29 degrees in the ninth house in Scorpio is a real thing. It's not something that anybody can ignore. Um, And so a lot of things that people paved the path to be talking about now are actually being addressed by and large. I mean, when people scan the Epstein, it goes to the clones, it goes to the Clintons and the clones, it goes to it goes to Family Trump. It goes to um, yes, it goes to yeah. it it goes to yes, the many trajectories that are MK Ultra. It goes to MK Often. It goes to the dark occultistic stuff. It goes to many people understanding many things. It goes to, yes, people running away from mentions. um, and 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 that's something that even in 2008 was unthinkable, that people will connect all these dots on air with all the attempts to control the media. And there are many people that secretly and probably unbeknownst to most of us paved the path for for me to be saying those things, for other people to be saying those things, And of course, we also went through, anybody that speaks went through stuff, okay? Um, and that was also a part of that. Um, and with those Neptune placements, a person would be put in a place where there is seclusion, there is grief, there is disillusionment, from, an ideal of something, but there is also manifestation and reckoning, and the understanding that it's not about giving up our dreams, but about building the infrastructure and manifesting our dreams in a way that is actually joyous. It's about what is missing has been there for a long time, but it's also what we notice present in its missing is basically a trajectory of a void that is created for its manifesting. And the many things to try to delay a manifestation only cause it to manifest more fully. For me, the Pluto square juxtaposed to the Neptune square was the understanding of the political and social influence of my favorite artists, and like each one of them, the people that I've been listening all my life, whether it was Mariah Carey who divorced freaking Tani Motola. That was something that nobody would dare to do. That was, and she had to escape being locked in the place, um, which is, beyond scary. When I lived in Arad, my apartment's door was constantly open, not unlocked, open. My mama bugged me, the realtor bugged me, everybody bugged me. I said no. And I remember that I noticed something, I don't even remember that, but there was something about it that with the intelligence, people have to keep the door closed. And I didn't do that. I had the intuition, the powerful intuition. And sometimes I'd even left my passport there, and the door was open. Um, so that's, um, there were, I think that the generation of, and as well, it was not just the political influence of artists, but also the artistic inclinations of business people and politicians. And and within that, the things that are so taboo that you know that only people like Anneke Lucas address, and those eurekas that people like Detru or Epstein, they were just in the death camp, and then the people that were somehow smuggled out managed to get out of the death camp, and they risk their lives on a consistent basis to not only stay out of the death camp, but bring other people out of the death camp. Um, with the understanding of what those people in those death camps do, which is, you know, beyond terrible, while learning that somebody whom I had considered for a decade my best friend, and I say that not with blame or judgment, it's just acceptance that that was the situation. Um, and I realized that anybody that would have that would want to do something with their lives, um, if we need to change the entire world so that they don't have to go along those trajectories. And a person that was quite close to my vicinity had gone along a certain trajectory that, as kind of like the older person, I had to both protect my life from, um, and that being juxtaposed to those things. Neptune Aries is also real estate, and if I remember myself as a young child, dreaming of houses made of wood logs, and then I remember that it gets moldy. Like I was told that it gets moldy. So it's funny how I've had the exposure to the actual practical knowledge when I was young, which was like his like, hey, that's nice to dream about it, but you have to kind of like be practical, something you can actually hold, and um, and the wounds around wealth acquisition, um, and wealth consolidation, that were lining up that changed the trajectory to be a realistic incarnation of a dream. And I think about Neptune in Capricorn, which is a lot about realistic incarnation of a dream, because as children we were really realistic. We were thinking about the challenges and the problems with our dreams because we were set to manifest them. And also we were exposed to things that children are not supposed to ever be exposed to. And I don't know exactly like the extent of all of that, and I know that most children are exposed to these things. Um, even when it comes to like the dream state or just knowing that certain things exist without being told. And and something that had to do with my lineage. Yeah, because Saturn can also be ancestry. So this is so far, and I've been talking a lot about Neptune because with Pluto square it was a lot about this. I mean, definitely, Pluto square was surrendering my power to stand in my power. And I surrendered my power to whether it was water expands upon cooling or uh, yeah, or tending to political. I was also, yes, there was also psychic torture involved, unfortunately. Um, so um, but that was one of the things that I remember around my Pluto square was I am with power, I am in power, which was kind of like a mantra that I got And I'm not going to elaborate more on that, like on the like circumstances. Um, and I definitely can relate to having, I'll put it that way. Safe, sane relational pattern was the enemy of the previous economy, and it shouldn't be the enemy of our economy from now on. Nor should willing consent or sexual sovereignty in spirit and in matter. So basically, when you think about people, you think about, okay, let's openly say that. You think about the fact that our politicians have to learn dark occult to try to generate a cult like disorganized attached the Stockholm syndrome with their electorate to supposedly win an election. Because that's the world that they grew up in, and to survive in that world, they had to develop a Stockholm syndrome to the people around them so that they would be safe. And now, when the world at large, outside those circles, learned about attachment patterns, tantric union, um, relaxed arousal, and all these things, then basically those Stockholm syndrome patterns are kind of a no-go. And there I can definitely see how the allure of the other side, okay, of coming out of the cave is absolutely, it's not even tempting, because it's not about something being a siren. It's about, hey, it's really about going out of the cave to actually live a life, and the many understandable frustrations that that invokes. Um, and while, there's definitely a total collapse of an old world, together with the fact that you think about, even older generation. I had a friend whose father didn't know that taking their anger on their child is going to cause severe trauma and disconnect. And they were thinking this is education. Even when I see this Soviet therapy type of thing, I'm like, a part of that is like, hey, how cool is to connect with Soviet culture and so on and so forth. And a part of that is like, kind of like, hey, we don't want to throw the baby with the cradle. We actually do want emotional intelligence in our relations, even when it comes to Slavic cultures. That some everybody stand their own in their own path and in their own journey. Um, but this is definitely, people are doing so much to build a future for themselves. They definitely don't want to throw out the joy of living when it comes to emotional warmth um, and emotional intelligence. Like, people have fought over being aware of the mental and emotional state being not only a real thing and a thing that needs to address, but another form of intelligence that allow us to have a satisfactory life, and we stand in our rights to have our emotions honored. And when that happens person to person, that happens also in the job.